In fact, the Ministry of External Affairs here in India has also welcomed the ceasefire agreement that has been reached upon by Israel and Hamas. They have in fact released a statement. The statement reads, and I quote, "We welcome the announcement of the agreement for the release of hostages and a ceasefire in Gaza. We hope this will lead to a safe and sustained supply of humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza. We have consistently called for release of all hostages, ceasefire and return to a path of dialogue and diplomacy," unquote. My colleague Saddam Mishra is with us on the broadcast. Saddam, this is good news for India, considering its relationship with both Israel and Palestine.
Well, absolutely. Perhaps this was impacting a lot when it comes to the global inflation, etc. And India was always in favor of peace. In fact, Prime Minister Modi also reiterated the other day that India has always stood on the side of peace. In fact, India has always been supporting the idea of two-state solution. India also has said that the solutions can only be found through dialogue and diplomacy. And since the deal has been struck, now the news comes from the External Affairs, where the ministry has welcomed the announcement of the agreement for the release of hostages and a ceasefire in Gaza. MEA hopes that this will lead to safe and sustained supply of humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza. We have consistent call for the release of all hostages, ceasefire, return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy. It's a very short release which has come from Minister of External Affairs. Perhaps India has always been on the side of peace. India has always supported the idea of two-state solution. India has always talked about peace in the Middle East. In fact, India was in constant touch with its partners and friends in the region regarding the developments taking place. In fact, when Prime Minister Modi was in US for the UNGA meeting, on the sidelines he met the Palestinian Prime Minister Mahmoud Abbas, and in fact, Prime Minister Modi had spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu also many times since the war broke out in the Middle East. So India was in constant touch with all the stakeholders in the Middle East, and perhaps India has welcomed this particular deal which has been struck between Israel and Hamas, and India has always pushed for dialogue and diplomacy. Last and the most important point, Kreha, the IMAC project, the international corridor which connects Asia to Europe, perhaps has got affected because of this war. That particular project was announced on the sidelines of G20, if you remember, and it passes through UAE, Middle East, UAE, Middle East, and via Israel, it enters Europe. Perhaps that project has really been affected because of the ongoing war. Because right after its announcement, within 1 month, there was a war which broke out this war broke out, and because of which there has been a very less development on that particular area. Now we could expect, since there has been a peace which has been achieved, the deal has been announced. It will get implemented from Sunday. We have been told the more details will be shared with the media in some time from now. We could expect that this mega project, which would connect Asia to the Europe, perhaps could again be back on track.
And Siddhant, how significant is this announcement right ahead of 20th January, the Trump inauguration, considering this has been made and confirmed by the outgoing US President Joe Biden, but Trump is taking the credit for it?
Well, Griha, this was on the cards, and even we were expecting this much before that Netanyahu got the window what he wanted to do for 3 months when US was in elections, and perhaps in those 3 months, Israel had eliminated almost all the top commanders of Hezbollah, Hamas, and the other rebel forces in the region. Now, this was on the card because Trump was adamant that he wanted a deal before he enters the office. And on the other side, the Biden administration was pushing for it because Biden also wanted a legacy before exiting from the office of the president. So perhaps there was an intent from both sides, and from Trump's team and from the Biden administration. And in fact, both of them were in touch with the Qataris, with the Egyptians, and obviously the Israelis. And there was a lot of pressure on Israel also since October. That since Israel has already eliminated the top commanders, they have dismantled Hamas network, Hezbollah network, and perhaps They
Okay.
have broken the entire backbone of the Iranian, rebel forces in the region. It's a time to come on the table for the ceasefire. So it's
Right.
an apt time for Israel also, and a win-win for both the sides.
Right, Siddhant, thank you so much for all of your input there. In fact, CNN News 18's Zachar Jacob spoke to American political scientist John Mearsheimer on the hostage deal that has been inked. Listen to that conversation.
About the foreign policy problems, the Israel-Hamas situation. There's a lot of reports this week that they're close to, clinching a deal. It's just a matter of time, and it'll likely get done before Trump assumes office. Do you see that happening? What may be the broad contours? And if it does happen before Trump takes office, who takes credit for it?
Well, I think if it does happen, and I do think it's likely to happen because the Israelis are exhausted and the Israelis are suffering significant casualties in Gaza. There's all this talk in the mainstream media in the United States that Israel has won all these great victories and is in great shape today. That's simply not true. And in Gaza, they're in real trouble. So there's a lot of pressure on Netanyahu to cut a deal and get most of the hostages back. And of course, Hamas has a vested interest in the deal as well. I think they will get a deal. The question is what will happen after that? Will the deal stick? Will they get a meaningful ceasefire over the long term? That's much more questionable. And of course, that's of great importance. Who will get credit for it? I think, although both sides deserve credit, and what's happening on the ground is the real driving force, not what either one of these presidents has done. But I think that Trump will get the credit for this. And by the way, I think that when the Ukraine war is finally lost, it will look like it's Trump's fault because Biden has done a brilliant job of kicking the can down the road and leaving office with Ukraine still in the fight. And if Ukraine drops out of the fight during the time when Trump is president, it will look like it's Trump's fault. But back to Gaza, I think that Trump will brag and will look like he's responsible for the agreement that I think are going to get.